James Fishback joins me. He's the CEO of investment firm Azoria, but he's the architect behind this DOGE dividend. And you're having now all these countless meetings on Capitol Hill. You tweeted this white paper. It's 4 pages long. It's very easy to digest. I suggest people go read it on your Twitter. But then Elon Musk tweeted back at you and said, I'll check with the president. And now this idea has legs. So walk us through what exactly is a DOGE dividend?
Well, good morning, Anne-Marie. It's very simple. DOGE is going to save potentially trillions of dollars over the next couple of years. Let's take 20% of that money and send it right back to the hardworking Americans who sent it to D.C. in the first place, the taxpayers. They didn't send it to D.C. to be wasted, to be defrauded or abused. It was their money. We're sending it back as a refund. There are 2 key benefits to this. First of which is restitution. Second of which, as the president noted on Air Force One last week, let's incentivize Americans to be part of this government efficiency process. They can be our eyes and ears on the ground to report waste, fraud, and abuse. Why? Because the more the DOGE saves, the bigger the DOGE dividend check will be in the end.
When you speak to members of Congress, I know you were at the House yesterday and you're going to go have meetings today with senators. When they talk about extending TCJA or adding on some of other Trump's priorities, like no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, they say that they're going to offset this with some of the savings at DOGE. So where is the dividend now in that priority list? Because that will take away from offsetting some of the deficit savings.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's a big part of this calculus here on Capitol Hill. 80% of the DOGE dividend in our proposal goes to narrowing the deficit and paying down the debt, only 20%. So we view it as a priority. Again, 80% goes to that purpose. But I think the bigger thing is the one-dimensional thinking here in D.C. is that things like no tax on tips or no tax on overtime are somehow an automatic hit to revenue. When we incentivize labor force participation by increasing the all-in pay for hardworking folks in hospitality or leisure, that brings folks off the sidelines. Anne-Marie, 7 million working-age men in America are not working. When they hear President Trump's bold plan for no tax on tips or no tax on overtime or even a DOGE dividend, guess what? They want to rejoin the labor force so they can earn those benefits. And so the biggest tax offset, to tell you the truth, for President Trump is going to be growth. If these changes can incentivize and supercharge the golden age, we're going to see nominal GDP pick up, we're going to see tax receipts pick up, and this thing is going to pay for itself in spades.
One issue that Trump campaigned on, and many would credit winning on, besides immigration, of course, is inflation. If you send out $5,000 checks, wouldn't that be inflationary, which many Republicans have accused of the stimulus checks we saw under the Biden administration of being?
It's a great point. Now, the stimulus checks under the Biden administration were an entirely different deal. For the first point, there was $6 trillion spent on COVID in stimulus. Only 13% of that was stimulus checks. Now, remember, supply and demand matter both. So you had a massive demand shock at the same time where you had a supply pullback with a labor shortage, you had lockdowns, you had supply chain dislocations. This time is very different. We don't have those considerations. And then secondarily, remember, this was taxpayer money not too long ago that was sent to Washington that is being sent back. And so the macroeconomy is different. Now, remember, under COVID, again, massive supply chain dislocations. Look at what's happening under President Trump and Secretary Bessent's leadership. Drill, baby, drill means lower inflation, lower gas prices, lower oil prices. We're seeing inflation come off, not necessarily last month or next month, but that's the bigger picture. The macro backdrop was disastrous for stimulus during President Biden. It's very favorable today. And when we ask folks, how would they spend these DOGE dividend checks? What do most folks tell us? They're going to use it to pay down debt. The only debt, it seems like in the mainstream media these days that folks care about, is the national debt. Consumer debt went up by more than 25% under President Biden. Why? They needed to borrow to keep up with inflation, to keep up with bad policy. Americans deserve a DOGE dividend to be able to pay off their own debt that President Biden forced them into.
Is this basically an extra tax refund then? Because if it's American taxpayer money that's being put back in their pockets, is that another way of basically saying this is just an extra tax refund?
Yeah, it's a refund because guess what? You sent your money to Washington to be spent in America, not to be spent in Iraq or a transgender opera in Colombia. Clearly, they violated the terms of that agreement, so money is owed back. It's a refund. If I go to Walmart, if you go to Costco, and we don't like the $1.50 hot dog, we are entitled to a refund. And so, yeah, send the money back to hardworking Americans, incentivize them. The bigger point here, and this is not directly captured in numbers, is we are going to restore the trust between taxpayer and her government. 7 out of 10 Americans do not believe that the federal government is using taxpayer dollars wisely. That number is going to go down. Taxpayer trust will go up under this plan, and I'm honored that President Trump supports it.